Hello and welcome to the Kitchen Conversations podcast. My name is Patrycja Rozwora and I'm the host of this platform where we speak about contemporary art from so-called Eastern Europe. In each episode, you're going to be introduced to one artist or researcher whose visual or activist practice sheds light onto the complex former socialist region with all its histories, cultures, languages, foods, but also traumas and their inevitable contemporary consequences. This podcast is a fully independent platform existing since May 2020, meaning it is not a funded project and it is self-run by me, myself, and I. If you enjoy the monthly conversations, please consider supporting the podcast by making a single donation on buymeacoffee.com/kitchenconversations or becoming my monthly Patreon via the Patreon website. All the needed links can be found in the show notes of this episode. After a few Between Mothers episodes, it's time for a regular Kitchen Conversations, this time with Sebastian Wells, a photographer whose long-term documentary projects explore the interplay between spaces, people, and systems of power. In 2022, Sebastian co-founded the English-language magazine Solomiya, together with Vsevolod Kazarin, and continues to contribute as a photographer, writer, and editor at large. If you stick around, you'll hear how Sebastian's passion for marathon running developed into his professional path as a sports and documentary photographer. You'll also learn about his first trip to Kyiv after the beginning of the full-scale invasion and how that experience grew into a magazine collaboration and a special bond with the city and its creative scene. Have a good listen. So welcome, Sebastian, to Kitchen Conversations. Happy to have you here.
Thank you, Patrycja. Very glad for the invitation.
Are you now in Berlin or are you somewhere?
Yes, I'm at home in Berlin. I live in Berlin-Weißensee. That's in the northeast of the city.
Do you? I also live in Weißensee.
And are you there right now?
I am. That's so funny.
I moved here, it's been 6 or 7 years ago. And I think I really like this district. It's where the city center slowly fades out into the suburbs, but it's not yet the suburbs. It's somewhere in between, and the district sometimes resembles a small town city center in Brandenburg, and sometimes resembles like a very rough industrial, like old industrial landscapes. Like 2 streets behind my street, there are many like crafts people studios that were used as the film studios in the GDR back in the days. And I like this mix of the districts, and I always advertise among my friends to move here, and nobody does, but it's good to know that you're here.
Let's have a walk or something at some point. I love Weißensee.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not a podcast about Weißensee yet. Let's start speaking about you because you're the guest on the podcast. We will speak about your amazing projects you're doing with great people as well, because you work a lot collectively, especially on the magazine that we will, I think, mainly focus on, the Solomiya magazine. But for the beginning, I guess an intro would fit. So maybe you can share something about your background, your education, and how you define yourself, your work.
I really like this term, by the way, because I'm a photographer. So when I think about backgrounds, it has both a literal and a physical meaning. My background is I was born and raised in the southeastern and southwestern suburbs of Berlin. I went to school. When I was in school, at some point, I was very passionate about sports, athletics. I was running. I wanted to become a marathon runner. At some point, never made it. I stopped when I was maybe 14 to pursue this path. That was also very hypothetical in a way, but still quite intense. I stopped also because I was hurt quite a lot. My body was not made for this sort of amount of running. all the time. But also because I simply did not eat enough. I had anorexia. I always saw images of those Kenyan and Ethiopian marathon runners that were championing the Berlin Marathon every year, and I saw them. I felt that I want to be like them, and they appear to be much thinner than I was. So, I tried to to fit into this image, and maybe that's a good transition to talk about photography then, in a way that when I stopped running, I mean, I still just do for fun, but not for any purpose. Bought my first camera, and then I went to some athletics competitions and other sports competitions where I would usually wanted to take part myself. I took pictures instead, and I tried to become a sports photographer and try to fake or just copy the kind of images that I saw in the newspapers every day that were on our living room table. My mother always subscribed to various newspapers, mostly the Tagesspiegel, so that was my reference, and I actually pursued that path, and I did become a sports photographer, and I started working already while I was in school, and after school kept continuing, kept working, and then I went to study photography. And I studied here in Weißensee, next to where I live, at the Ostkreuzschule, which is a school for photography. It's a private school, but it's a very peculiar school because I think it's the only one in the entire country that has such a specific focus on documentary photography. It's literally a school, right? It teaches you, it gives you a very precise idea of the kind of photography that you will have to follow, that you want to follow, but you also only go there if that is actually what you're interested in. Still, I was very young. I was 18. I had just made my A-level. I had just left school. I was a sports photographer. I didn't know anything about documentary photography and its historical legacies, its artistic genealogies, and anything. I just went there, and I somehow they took me. But it was actually a great school at the moment where I was back then, because it really helped me to. I mean, I already had technical knowledge about photography quite a lot, because I was using it also professionally. I was using it in sports. You have to be very fast. You have to be able.
Indeed, that's quite hard, no?
Do things right away without thinking, right? Sports, athletes don't wait for you to take up the camera and to put the right settings and so on. I already knew how to kind of communicate and how to advertise my work. I was very young. I was still in school and was calling the newspapers and saying hey, I'm a photographer. How can I send you my pictures? And
that's so cool.
And it worked in a way. So yeah, I already had some lessons, and what the Ostkreuzschule and the teachers there and also my fellow students really taught me was to think about photography in a sense of authorship. It makes a difference whether you are the person who is taking the picture or whether somebody else is taking the picture, because your personal, we talked about this, the background is significant and makes difference in how you look at things and how you see things and how you perceive things. And I think that's also the main idea of documentary photography at Ostkreuzschule, and I think also still an idea of photography that I identify with today, is that you are an observer and you are documenting something. You are not setting up the stage, and you're not writing the plot and so on, but you're kind of going with the flow. But at the same time, you are very conscious about the fact that you are there and that you are, even as an observer, you're not just a bystander, but you are a participator in the event, and you are shaping this whole thing, whatever you're seeing, whatever unfolds in front of your eyes as well.
Did it actually, so you said you stopped doing sport and then you took the camera and started photographing from the other side of the camera, let's say. Did it make you feel kind of comfortable and at ease that you stopped, or didn't you have this kind of feeling that you would like to come back, or is it still coming to you?
Actually, absolutely not. I don't exactly know why. I mean, I kind of managed to keep running as something that I do in the evenings when I have the time, when I have the joy to just go for a run around the Weißensee. And you know, running is for me the moment when I don't take my phone with me. I don't have Strava. I don't have any of these apps that people are using today. I was running, I got socialized as a runner when I was, you know, when we were in times when running was really uncool. Like, of course, people were going to the Berlin Marathon, but otherwise, running was the most freaky thing you could ever do. And it's totally weird. And it's a very, spectacular development that today so many people are joining running clubs, and whether they're being called Adidas runners or Kraft runners or any kinds of runners, and that's fascinating. And I think that's a big turning point in sports. But I think I'm still pretty much the same kind of very purist runner that I always was. I just go out and then I run, and I'm very fast, but I'm not running along. Like, I like 5 kilometers and that's it.
That's a great distance. And in terms of your documentary photography, are you deciding for yourself already while you studied, or now what exactly you want to focus on? How do you think about your work in that terms?
First of all, I mean, one of the projects that I pursued ever since, like during the whole period of starting to study at Ostkreuzschule, and then also later I studied again in Bielefeld and in Ghent in Belgium, I actually managed to kind of combine the sport thing and the documentary photography thing in a project that I was working on at Olympic Games. That's something I did since 2016, and this project is not at all about sports photography, but it's about looking at Olympic Games as a humongous political theater, as, you know, a place that is not just a competition, but like a mirror of society in a way, and also a playground for all sorts of mass media. And I think that this project, and by the way, I'm going to make a book about this right now, like with all the works that I did over the last 10 years, coming out next month.
Ooh, nice. That's great to have the podcast come.
Yeah, I think that's already like a first step into all the other works that I did ever since. So the thought about how, not just how does photography works, but also how works photography in the context of media and in the context of mass media. How do attention hierarchies work? How does the relation between the space and the subject, like the people in the photograph, how's that working, and so on and so forth. I think that this work kind of really is a foundation for many of the things that I did afterwards and that I'm doing today. Even with the magazine, I think there are many links that draw on this experience from working at the Olympics. There was never such a plan to say, like, I have this topic in mind or I have that project in mind. It always came very impulsively and very spontaneously. And usually when there was a certain sort of occasion, like for instance, I'm a part of the photographers agency Ostkreuz, which is a collective of photographers. It's something like structure-wise, it's something like Magnum Photos, but just way smaller and way more local. Sometimes we do work on exhibitions, for instance. We do collective exhibitions, collective projects, and that always creates an occasion to think about what could be a new project that you want to work on. But also like the graduation project at Ostkreuzschule, or then also later in Bielefeld that I was working on, is always a moment when you think like, okay, I have this space, I have the moment of at least publicity in a small scale. That's a chance for me. So what's the thing that I want to talk about? What's the thing that I want to like tackle in a way? And how do I want to provoke some thoughts and foster some discussions and so on? Yeah.
In your daily work, you do travel a lot, I assume.
Yeah, that's correct, I think. So now we're talking a moment when I did not travel for, I think, 4 weeks, but that's already like a lot. So I'm now feel very homey and too much homey already. Like I do travel quite a bit. I have been, obviously, we talk about that later, I guess. I mean, I'm traveling a lot to and from Ukraine, and but also elsewhere. So that's a very integral part of my work to travel. I think if I'm like traveling is a bit like the motor, is a bit of the battery, the refresh button. It's very, very central. Yeah,
that's a nice analogy or a metaphor. But yeah, since you already mentioned your trips to Ukraine, I think this is a good moment to get into that. This is, of course, how I got to know your work and your person. I think at some point you wrote me wanting to meet for a coffee. This still didn't happen, but I visited the recent launch of Solomiya magazine and we briefly spoke. Maybe you can speak about your work in Ukraine, how it started. Did it start with the full-scale invasion?
The founding story of the magazine does start with the full-scale invasion in 2022. We talked a lot about documentary photography and mass media events. And I mean, the Olympic Games may be one, but then also like other very much non-sportive events are so as well. So I worked a lot in environments like big protests and so on. And when the full-scale invasion started, I did feel the urge that I have to think about what I can do as a photographer and how can I somehow contribute something with my camera, with what I feel able to do. And that eventually led to the decision that I traveled to Kyiv in, I think, April 2022, after the north of the city was deoccupied and people were slowly returning to Kyiv. And I wasn't the first time in the city. I was there before, but I think I was the first time there that I was really trying to get a sense of where I actually was. Yet I was at the start tremendously lost in all sorts of senses. Like, what the hell am I doing here as a photographer? Like, some of my friends, they are way more familiar with war photography in that very literal sense. And of course, they were going right straight to the front lines and were working there and were like producing those news images that everyone could see. They knew how to move around, how to work in the situation. I had absolutely no idea. I did not take any of those press photographers equipment like a bulletproof vest or a helmet or anything. I felt like if there's something coming closer, I would just pack my stuff and go as fast as possible. I was really not interested in becoming a war photographer in that sense. But I wanted to go to Kyiv in order to get a better understanding of what everyone talks about in the news. So there's the moment when there are terms like all eyes on wherever, right? And there's a certain social media dynamic and everybody talks about A, B, or C. And that usually refers to like, no, like every year there's one more war that we have to talk about. But the question of witnessing and of what does it mean to actually be there and what does it mean to actually be physically exposed to a place instead of just talking about it, instead of just consuming images from the place where something happens. I think that makes a fundamental difference. And I think when you are a photographer or when you worked in documentary photography, you really understand the difference between if you're just seeing something in the media or online and when you're actually there and when you try to get your own image of this. So I was in Kyiv and I had still no idea what to do. And I was very much lonely, walking around as much as I felt like it is possible at all, because there were also many blog posts and all the things. And after 2 days, I already felt like, okay, we'll probably just go back. There's no there's no good reason for me to be here. But then I eventually met Vsevolod. Vsevolod Kazarin is also a photographer. He, at that moment, was doing his first stops in fashion photography. And we met for the first time on Maidan. Actually, that's where we drank. It's not really the place where you drink a coffee, but we met on Maidan. Okay.
Why isn't it a place? Because of the historical and political importance, you shouldn't drink coffee there?
Maidan is a bit like the Brandenburger Tor, the Pariser Platz in Berlin is the place where everybody goes to protest, and it has a profound historical and political and symbolical meaning, but it's not quite pleasant to just hang out. It's just not.
It's expensive also.
Yeah, not even that it's expensive, but it's just not the, it's not the vibe to have a coffee. So Vsevolod and I were vibing, I think, had a similar problem because he, coming from fashion photography, was also entirely helpless. So what to do now with the camera when there is a war, and how to respond to that full-scale invasion, and how to make sense of what you spent so much time on learning in the last years. So the next day we met again, and we had a very simple idea. We just took portraits of people in our age. We just walked around the whole day. The only important aspect for the people that we were looking for, people who are kind of conscious about their image in the public space, in a way, not that it's a fashion photography, but that the way how you appear in the public space, you want to create some sort of an image of yourself. It's already kind of acting somewhere. And then in that particular moment when the full-scale invasion just had started, and there's a very big sense of emergency and security, and everything might just crumble tomorrow, and who knows what's going to happen. So in that moment, we took photographs, many of them. I was there maybe 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks, just a few weeks later. And eventually we had the idea to not just do this alone, not just take our photographs, but make something like a magazine. And then I asked my graphic designer friends, Peter and Annalena, with whom I had already worked before. We have the rough idea of making a magazine. Would you maybe want to join us? Vsevolod was asking a friend of him, Andriy Oshitsky, who is still one of our close core team members till this day, do you maybe want to write some text? Because we saw some of his texts on Instagram that he had posted, and we quite liked them. So we felt maybe that's something. I was asking an institution, the Akademie der Künste, where we had exhibited with Oscars before, whether they could give some money. Luckily, back in the days when everybody had a sense of extreme emergency, that was easier than it is today, for sure. And so on, that's how things came together, and it eventually became a magazine, even though that was not the mission to make a magazine, but it was more an accidental but very lovely and very sustainable outcome of it.
Did it make you feel more comfortable to have a local at your site, to direct the camera at the local Ukrainians?
I know what you mean. The thing is that I think from the first day we really worked. I think it took us maybe a couple of hours to really trust each other and to really understand how are we going to work together. So on the first day, I think we still had both our cameras. Sometimes I took pictures with mine, and then Vsevolod took pictures with his camera. But in the end, we just worked with one camera to a degree that honestly today I don't know with every picture that we took who actually pressed the shutter button. So it really became a very collaborative work. It really was a sense of, I know some things, Vsevolod knows some things, and of course the moment of talking to the people and saying, hey, sorry, we are Sebastian and Vsevolod, we want to make a project. And then later also we had the idea to make a magazine. So Vsevolod was asking about this, of course, in Ukrainian. I mean, it was necessary for me to have Vsevolod to work on this, to get to this idea at all. Because I remember we had a discussion at first before we started, and then I was wondering, hey, Vsevolod, what is actually important for you? What are you interested in? And he said, like, I'm interested in young people in my generation. And I think this is what also created the link, because Kyiv, and also young people in Kyiv, that's not so local as it sounds. Most of the people we photographed, I think, already had traveled to Berlin or already had traveled elsewhere and had very much an idea of not just being like local Kyivites, but more than, I don't know how to find the right word, but more than this for sure. So I think that also the sense of, the slight form of posing in front of a camera also did something, because it wasn't just us directing what to do. We were looking for backgrounds and so on. We were looking for backgrounds where there was also a sign of, you could see some block posts or some sandbags or those infrastructural elements that were very visible at the start of the full-scale invasion all over Ukraine and also like particularly in Kyiv. But still, it was like, I think it was very evident. And I think this was also like not evident, but that's the fun part of the project. And that's where it became to feel meaningful, because I think every one of us, including the people we photographed, has a form of agency in the picture. Like, gave some salt to the soup, contributed something that the picture became what it became. And there is a triangular dynamic, Vsevolod, me, and the photographed person, which in that form I had also never felt before or never had before in any of my other projects. First of all, because I always worked alone. Photography for me was always a very lonely endeavor, because I never photographed like such a portraits that are so aware of being a portrait setting. So it's not just an observation moment, but it's a stage, it's a little theater on the street, literally. I don't know if that answers your question. I think I rather avoided your question, but I do know what you mean with the sense of like, I'm the foreigner there. And of course, like I'm looking at this from the perspective also how it feels for me today. And obviously in the first days of being in Kyiv, I felt very much like a foreigner. And I think over the time I learned at least to what extent I meant foreigner. And then today I'm also looking at this from the perspective of someone who has been there so often that I also feel a bit like at home in the city as well. And I meet more people on the streets in Kyiv, I think, than I meet in Berlin. The reason is maybe that I live in Weißensee. and I would meet more people elsewhere. But so like the city, like particularly the city Kyiv, became such an like integral part of both my social surrounding, but also like as a place that I think I know quite well, even though I'm still a foreigner. But I think there's a closeness or proximity to what I photograph that I would never have in any other occasion where I also photograph, where I travel somewhere far in that sense. Yeah.
Seeing these photographs, I kind of had the feeling of being close to those people, because as you said, most of them were probably traveling to Berlin, and we are kind of the same. We are just, creative people who also, like to speak to others on the street. As you said, it's not the locals. And I think this probably, I don't know if that was the idea of the first magazine, but to kind of show that it's not there far away, but it's just here, and it's not us and them, but we should kind of, think about us as a humanity that is at risk and needing help.
You're very right that at the moment when we started this project, we did have, probably didn't talk about this in that way, because like it's already been sadly 4 years ago, and also the magazine and our approach on the magazine really changed a lot. And we did have this intention in the first weeks that we were working at, hey, like basically we do, pragmatically speaking, we need that support of the West, whatever that is, that I think also contributed to the idea to make an English language magazine ultimately. And exactly what you said with, like they're basically like us. Like that was a very common saying among Westerners, like who were surprised that what they feel is probably unique to a sense of like Western Europe, whatever that means, is not so unique and is not so exclusive. And that's not like the club that you adhere to and that doesn't really exist anywhere else, or that is just there, in Berlin and then further west.
That everyone wants to join and come to the center to enjoy it.
Yeah. But then also, ever since, like after this first moment of maybe surprise, like they are like us, which I think is still a very problematic rhetorical construction, because it actually just recreates the day. Like it recreates the day from a perspective that, like we thought you're so different, but you're just like us. But by emphasizing this, you in a way just press another label on it, and you say like, oh yeah, you're almost like us, like you're still somehow different, and it's not, it's not quite the same, but nice surprise, like you're cool. The magazine approach really changed in the sense that we at first wanted to speak to those Westerners, and then we understood like, honestly, they are not interested in that. They are just, now I'm also talking about they. But, if there's no moment of surprise, like they are like us, for instance, there's no fundamental interest that is very sustainable. And from the start on, I think we've encountered the situation that people in Kyiv, for instance, or in Ukraine in general, were way more interested in the magazine than anybody else. So I think that experience of, okay, like even if we, in brackets, right, if we try to make a magazine for them, it doesn't really, like they, in brackets again, don't really care about this, but we care about this far more. And I think that thought and that experience still shapes us, how we think about publishing and how we think about who is actually our public, like who is the sort of publishing ecosystem that we're contributing to today, that we are also like trying to serve and trying to be engaged with, and so on. So yeah.
And now 4 years later, you still publish, you just published the number 5. How, maybe you can speak how, because you were saying that it shifted, so maybe you can kind of jump into the latest edition and how it kind of developed, and also how you choose artists or people who are featured in the magazine. I'm curious how you find them, how you approach them, how you work with them.
The 5th issue is a good issue to talk about the whole genesis of the magazine, in a way that it really became some sort of a culmination of all the approaches that we had pursued before. So the first 3 issues were very much produced out of the very moment and out of the very like emotional point of view or state of mind that we were in, depending on like how the war evolved and how our feelings towards the war evolved over the time. And of course, it was very different in 2022 with moments of deoccupation, also like a large scale kind of deoccupation. And then later, when this war becomes ever more long and more people die, and also like people that die and friends die and buildings that you know are being destroyed and so on. We always try to respond to those very emotions we were immersed in the first 3 issues, and I think that also made created a sense of how are we going to collect all the contributions. I think one person I really want to mention here, how do we select contributors and how do we select artists? Ivana Kozachenko, who became one of our team members since the 2nd issue. She is a person that is a curator, like something like a curator, but it's just like in a very literal sense a cultural work, and somebody who is extremely connected and extremely like the sort of bringing people together, and the sort of networking is, I think, a very core part of her practice. And like the contributions of the magazine, I think, really depend on our networks in the end. And Ivana has been really, really central to this, I think, and to also the way how we think about what are the topics that we want to talk about and whom do we want to bring together and so on and so forth. Eventually, with the fourth issue, that was a bit of a changing point because we were approached by Dmytro Cheporny, who is also now fighting in the army, unfortunately. And he approached us saying that he would really want to make sort of a special issue of Solomiya about environmental questions in Ukraine, because he is a part of the Ukrainian Environmental Humanities Network, which is a collective of researchers and of artists who is working with the topic of environment in Ukraine or environmental humanities in Ukraine. And that was very new for us because none of the issues before had a very specific thematic focus or had, in any way a monothematic approach. So at first we felt like, probably this is kind of a different thing, and that's not even a Solomiya magazine, what Dima thought about at that moment. But it was an extremely fruitful collaboration for us to actually then do this sort of magazine and do that fourth issue and have just one topic for the whole magazine and select different texts and contributions and also visual artists' contributions for that.
Visually, that one is also quite different from what I saw,
exactly.
Right?
It was more conceptualized as a reader. It has a smaller format. So everything is a bit different, yet I think the sort of thematic approach and also the editorial collaboration with the Ukrainian Environmental Humanities Network, I think, really brought us much further in thinking about the magazine and how, what can we impact with the magazine. We saw that we had many international purchases in our online shop of the magazine, because also, if you talk about a specific topic, like environment, for instance, decolonial perspective of landscapes, ecocide, these are topics that are not entirely exclusive to Ukraine and to Ukrainian context, but people think about landscape and people think about environment everywhere, all over the world. So this topic is actually a great bridge to connect different contexts with each other and to also break this isolating moment that people are either interested in Ukraine or they're not interested at all. This was a very important issue, and I think the fifth issue now that we just released in November is very much a mix of the first three issues and there it is of the first three and the fourth issue, in the sense that it does have some sort of thematic focus. It brings together quite a different set of political and geographical context as well, while following questions or while following thoughts about future and how to imagine the future. And the title of the magazine is After Now. So literally, what's tomorrow, but also in a very metaphorical sense, in a metaphysical sense, how can we imagine futures at all when we are subjective to an ongoing war of attrition, where you manage to think about today and maybe tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow is already something that adheres to the far distant future, and something that you don't even feel like you can shape because you just don't know what is going to happen.
Is there more coming?
Of course. No, definitely one more special issue, a bit like the reader that we had with the environmental issue is coming, hopefully this year. Then it's always a question of funding and always a question of how do we manage to get together the resources that we need to make magazines, because printing is extremely expensive, and the whole work of distributing the magazine, by the way, distributing that we do have the help of Shift Books, which is a publisher based in Berlin, is also really, really difficult in terms of, it's not just like internet and you make a post and it's going to be out there, and if you manage to kind of be in line with the algorithms, you get some audience easily. But there's a whole lot more to it, and you need money to it in order to realize it. So the funding situation is always our greatest obstacle, something that we're always struggling with, and something that we still, however, managed to find some solutions so far, and find some funding from foundations and also like magazine sales and so on. So we are optimistic that this is going on, but it's not going to be easy for sure.
And how can people get hands on the latest and all the other issues?
I don't know where you are, so I don't know where you're listening to this podcast. If you are in Berlin, you can go to Do You Read Me? I'm sure that the listeners of this podcast who are in Berlin will know about this place. If you're in Warsaw, for instance, you could go to Ujazdowski Castle and check out some nice exhibitions, and afterwards get to see the bookshop there and get the magazine. And if you are in Kyiv, then you can go to Rebellion, for instance, which is a really nice magazine shop, or you can go to Zbirka, which is an outstanding bookshop in the very center of Kyiv and Reiterska Street. But of course, you can also just order it online. There are all information on our website, solomiyamag.com. That really sounds like advertisement now, but it's just information.
Well, we are advertising an independent magazine. I think it's allowed.
No, by the way, independent magazine, I'm really a fan of not saying independent magazine, because we are dependent. And the thing is that we know that we are very dependent. Like, we depend on people who are reading us. We depend on all the artists contributing to the magazine. We depend on external funding and so on and so forth. So I think that, the difference to maybe a more oligarchic or commercial media is that we know from whom we are dependent, and it's not just one person, but it's a crowd of people. So I really like to say something like collective publishing and not independent publishing, because independent is such a lie. But of course, we're all very independent minds, and maybe that's the reason to call it like this.
Cool. Last but not least, we already know that something new is coming for the magazine and for your publication. Looking forward to that. But last but not least, on the Kitchen Conversations, we end up by speaking about food. There's always kind of a abrupt change, but I find it's a nice one. And what comes up when you think about food and foods, favorite foods from a place that feels like home?
Favorite food, I think it's like, I don't know, it changes from time to time. Probably right now it would be a full soup. But the food that came into my mind when I was seeing a question beforehand was a dish that my father used to cook quite frequently on the Sundays when my two siblings and I were still living at home and he was cooking. This dish is called Königsberger Klopse. It's a very German dish. It's basically, I mean, you can look it up if you don't know it, but that's kind of meat, balls, and in some sort of a soup, and then potatoes usually accompanying it. And Königsberger Klopse is very revealing as a name because it comes from a place that sounds a bit different now, like Kaliningrad, obviously. But that's a very Prussian food legacy that lived on. And when I was a child, and when we had this dish on Sundays, of course I did not think about that Königsberger Klopse is actually, indicates a certain place, a certain geographical location. But when I was last year in Gdansk for the first time, it was kind of a revealing moment when I feel like, oh, yeah, okay, this dish somehow created a sort of a flashback. I would even argue it's kind of sad, actually, that you eat this dish. It probably means something, or it has a certain geographical heritage, and you just you're such a child and you're so naive and you're not thinking about this at all. And now I have a very difficult relation with my dad, so we rather not talk about politics. So I don't really want to talk about Königsberger Klopse at all, but that's the food I had in mind when reading your question.
Thank you so much. I'll check this dish out. Yeah, maybe read about its geographical and historic meaning. That's always nice to add also to, how we think of food and also eating together and what history it beinhalts. I forgot the English word.
Yeah.
And this was it for today. Thank you for reaching till the end of this episode. The next one is coming in 4 weeks, always on Monday. Please follow the podcast and leave a rating. I'm also happy to hear your feedback, so feel free to write me via Instagram or by email. All the needed info you will find in the show notes of this episode. In the meantime, take good care and we hear each other soon.